The word of the day is prionopathy. Comes from prion and pathy, or prion, some say. They're proteins. They misfold. The most famous result is mad cow disease. But prionopathies are anytime these misfolding proteins come to disrupt the functioning of the body. They have a way of multiplying. There's a seed-like thing where once the seed gets going, it can grow into enough of this non-functional material to disrupt the body's function. We see it most often with the brain where we can really see it, but it turns out it's happening everywhere. And the spike protein, the famous spike protein that some crazy people think was an engineered bioweapon, has the seeds in it to make these prion diseases take off. And there are signs they're taking off. And I've been kind of shaken up watching the scientists who are hip to this and talking about it. It's big concern that we may be walking around with time bombs inside us that are killing us slowly or rapidly, depending on the particular flavor. Anyway, check these guys out. I clipped you a little bit of the conversations of two of the really brilliant men in the field, Kevin McCarran and Walter Chestnut. Here you go.
That suffering. People are suffering a lot right now, and my concern is less about the. We've got all the increased death. We can see it in the data, in the all-cause mortality.
Oh yes.
And one of the leading causes of death is Alzheimer's and dementia disorders. That's one of the classifications. They don't include Parkinson's. They don't include frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, multisystem atrophy, and all sorts of non-familial Creutzfeldt-Jakob, etc. And so we know that there's a signal there. But my concern is, those people that are probably being taken out at that stage, what did they might have had 5-10 years more. My concern is the 20 to 30-year-olds who get these long hauler states, and then they're not the same afterwards. And what can we do for them?
Well, what I see is that and I think that the research has been focused on prionopathy in the brain. Mm. But what I see is happening is that exact process is occurring in all of the body's organs and systems. It is a prionopathy of the heart, it is a prionopathy of the liver, of the lungs, of the endothelium. It is not, and I think people are having trouble seeing that prionopathy. I think everyone has in their mind, prion brain. Mm. And people seem to think it is simply a CNS issue dealing with the brain mainly. Mm. And what the spike protein is doing is that exact same process, but systemically in all organs, in all tissues, even in the skin. I would even go so far as to say things that we've seen, such as the cutaneous manifestations, are very similar. If you look at the eyes and amyloidosis, what can happen to the face. I think if you look at the lesions, they're very, very, very similar. And ID may be the same mechanism. But I think most people have trouble embracing or entertaining or accepting the notion that prionopathy can happen to any tissue. It doesn't have to be your brain.
That's the dark valley that's below the science, the illumination from science onto these disorders. The reason that the focus is on neural systems is because that's where it becomes very manifest. Obviously,
Okay.
right? Because
Right.
you can have someone. Let's say you're 30 years old and you get something like SARS-CoV-2. It is it's got wide tissue tropism, and you've got this assault on all the organs. The issue
Wow.
is that we the individual might complain about the feeling terrible and the muscles
But if
hurt.
you have bits of the heart being transformed, it's not going to manifest, or bits of the liver or bits of the lung, the way bits of the brain
Mm,
being
mm,
amazing.
mm,
Oh, Kevin,
mm,
that, yes, you do not notice it. It does not manifest in the same obvious way as when parts of the brain are being converted
mm,
into a non-functioning mass.
mm,
That is obviously apparent, but it's not so quickly detected when it's the heart or the
mm,
lung or the liver or the kidney.
mm.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. That's
And so,
brilliant.
and they don't. It's not looked for, right?
And it's
Because
not looked for. Wow,
unless
that is amazing.
you get a full diagnosis of systemic amyloidosis, right? And there are
Right.
familial forms that exist out there that they know are associated with that disease condition. Then in this instance, that they will go to the effort to look at the tissue and say, aha, we can see the protein misfolding. But in most instances, especially if you had like a, what they're calling SAD right now,
Oh,
sudden
oh my
adult death,
God. Yes.
right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you put that second quote up on the screen that I sent, which this explains, if you can put that second quote I sent up,
Mm.
this explains exactly what is happening.
Sudden death in patients with amyloidosis is usually attributed to pulseless electrical activity followed by ventricular arrhythmias, but may be result of thromboembolic complications or bradyarrhythmias, conduction system disease secondary to amyloid infiltration or autonomic dysfunction. Yeah.
And that is exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, you can beat up your organs a lot, right? Just look how many I look at the people on the street, right, that live from one hit to the next, right?
Yes.
The body itself can absorb a lot, and the before they turn into raving crazies, right? They're still they'll be walking around, and we've all done it, right? When you
Right.
when you drink a boy bit too much, you take that extra ecstasy pill when you know you don't need it. You got work in 12 hours. You're just putting the body under strain, but you can still get up and function, and you bounce back somewhat. The brain doesn't have the as much capacity for recovery. There is, there's obviously still plastic responses in the brain. You see this with stroke. Someone who can be sort of hemiplegic when the stroke happens, with the right treatment, they can get a degree of functionality back. But it's because we're on the cusp of what is a new. Well, it's not a new paradigm, but it's, the old guard is changing, and newer people coming in will be thinking about these more fundamental levels, and it extends beyond the spike protein. We get into very complex interactions right now, because my concern is that with the gene transfection technology, that maybe you're okay if you just get exposed to that. The body handles that in such a way that it can, its compensatory mechanisms can cope with it, and the adverse events we see, although obviously they're way higher than people would like to admit, there's going to be a lag between any, the initial transfection and anything that emerges downstream of the the shot itself. But we're in a situation where you've got this pathogen, this highly transmissible pathogen, scooting from people to people, and it's not just the spike protein that induces this protein misfolding. And this is that Nature paper I was talking about, which has done a good job of looking at ORF6 and 10, and saying that these are non-structural proteins that are being synthesized and form the protein misfolding. Now, couple that with the onslaught of the synthetic, then we've got a cocktail that I personally, I would argue, should be done in primates under BSL-free type conditions. Right? This isn't something that you would just roll out en masse and try to sell people the idea of what Jonathan calls the sort of cartoon immunomythology as being the way out of this maze, if you like, the trap that we're in. And Malcolm,
when it comes to the injections and the immunomythology, what and this is a question that I wanted to ask you, because we know the spike forms complexes with the Fc receptor. So my question is, in your study of prion disease and prionopathies, does the Fc receptor play a role?
I didn't focus on that. So that my focus was again on the brain, right? But I lucked out, if you like, by having or discovering this one monkey that developed a spontaneous amyloid condition. And I'll share my screen with you, and I'll
thank you.
Show the people what I'm talking about. And let's do this.
So you actually had a monkey develop spontaneous amyloidosis.
Yeah, and basically early onset. And as a monkey, it was very hard to classify what it was. Now, it presented more like a Parkinsonian type syndrome, but it was L-DOPA unresponsive.